Welcome once again to everyone watching and listening to this edition of the Football Goons podcast. This week, we're checking in with the fourth and final installment of our 2017 Fantasy Football Ranking Series. If you missed any of the past three, you're going to want to get back on and check out those three right after you hear this edition of the podcast so that you don't lose any ground in your prep work for this season. Before we get into our discussion this week, though, something very important that we need to talk about, because as you may notice, Mr. Manners himself there, Ryan Deal, is eating during the show. So we've got to dive into it. You've got the Haribo Gold gummy bears there. I need to know, what is the best flavor of the Golden Bears?
I'll go ahead, since I'm the one eating them right now. It's fresh in my mind, and I'll let everybody else answer first.
I like to go with the combination, either two reds and a white or two whites and a red. Either one of those two is going for me. If you make me pick one color, it's got to be the reds.
I'm gonna catch crap for this, but I actually do love the green Haribos. But even
why
more
do you
so,
hate? Like, why do you like bad things? In everything, your favorite is a bad one.
Okay. I was going to say, though, my favorite Haribo in general is the root beer soda ones.
Well, the cola ones are better.
The cola ones are my favorite Haribo on the planet. I'll eat a 5-pound bag of those tonight as we're sitting here.
South, what are you working with?
Listen, I got to go with Rocco. The green ones are the best. And
yes.
Here's the thing. It's not even anything to do with the fact that they're like, green is usually a weird flavor in candy, but the green bears are strawberry,
which is ridiculous.
It doesn't matter.
It's my favorite.
It messes with your head, but it doesn't matter because it's strawberry. Strawberry is almost always the best, and I like
your favorite too.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it's by far the best. There's no other answer. But
I don't want to.
But in what world are there good green strawberries? If a strawberry is green, I'm throwing that thing away. Like, why would it possibly be green?
Okay, I understand they could have made it pink, but that's just too similar to the reds.
Change so you got red.
But that's cherry. What are you going to make that?
No, it's raspberry. It should be pink or black
or blue,
like purple. Yeah, any other color. Red. This is. It's two stuck together. This is strawberry, but it's not. It's raspberry. Why and what?
This is literally just more proof that we will argue about anything.
Yes, we will. And I think that one of the reasons why I think this was such a good idea to start out, because this gets us primed and ready to go, because now we're already at each other's throats. Yeah. So this is going to be a good addition.
Well, the three of us the three of us were right.
Well, but still, somehow we're all heated over it. In case you were wondering, regular Haribos are not kosher, but they do have a kosher line. So you can get kosher gummy bears. I was just looking at the frequently asked questions on their website. Apparently that's the most frequently asked.
I was pretty concerned about that. Although kids and grown-ups love it so.
Yes. All right. We got to move on from this because this is getting a little out of hand. This week, we're getting into the tight end position. As I mentioned during the opening there, if you didn't listen to any of the other podcasts in this series, you're going to want to go back after you listen live to this one or after you catch up on this one and check those out. We hit up on the quarterback, the wide receiver, and the running back positions, all on separate podcasts. Tonight, we're going to touch on the tight ends and get into some draft strategy. The past few years, this group has become a lot more balanced instead of being super top heavy, which is what we've kind of come to expect. And for that reason, we're going to give you kind of a 10,000 foot view of things and just hit on some of the more important stuff. Because if I'm being honest with you, none of us is super excited to talk about the tight end position, but we love fantasy football. So we're going to do it because obviously you got to talk about everything fantasy. So if you're listening, you're watching live, you can hit us up with any questions that you might have about tight ends you want to hear about, draft strategy in general. We're going to be getting to that in the second half of this episode. So let's get right into it here. Let's talk about our top five. We've got Travis Kelce at number 1, followed by Gronk, Jordan Reed, Greg Olson, and Jimmy Graham rounding out our top 5. Interesting thing here. I don't think anybody's really going to get mad at anybody for their opinion on this, but we've got Kelce and Gronk literally tied for first, as close as it can be. I'm wondering this, with a lot of the discussion in Kansas City about maybe Alex Smith being on the way out, does Kelce's stock improve or fall off in any way if Pat Mahomes takes over there at quarterback?
I don't think it changes much. I think in a lot of situations, a tight end for me, if a rookie's going to come in, it actually boosts the stock a little bit because they do tend to target those underneath routes that, a rookie's just trying not to mess up in a lot of cases. And sometimes that nice security blanket's there, cliche 1, cliche 2, cliche 3 about tight ends. But for me with Kansas City, I don't care because Alex Smith doesn't stretch the field either. So I don't see the targets changing. As much as I hate Alex Smith, if anything changes with Mahomes coming in, the accuracy will be worse because Alex Smith is an extremely accurate short level quarterback. So, I don't think Mahomes is going to come in and play, but if he does, I don't think it changes the stock a lot. If it does, though, maybe down a little bit. But Kelce's a monster, so it can't. As long as he gets the ball in his hands, he's dangerous.
I mean, let's not forget, this is a team that just got rid of Jeremy Maclin. They don't have a ton of options, really. I mean, Tyreek Hill is a nice, but Kelce is their number one option. So no matter who's playing quarterback, you're going to look to your best player. And on offense right now, Kelce's their most consistent and best player.
Yeah, I think it actually might work to his favor a little bit if there was a change, because for as much as they rely on him the way it is now, there's always that propensity for a rookie quarterback to lean on his tight end, to lean on that sort of that perceived check down option there in the middle of the field. So I don't know how much it could really go up, but I do think that his targets might actually expand a little bit. And for a guy who already had 85 catches last year, it's going to be really hard to improve on at the tight end position, but somehow I think that it just marginally bumps him up for me.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with what you guys say. I think it increases some, like you said, a rookie quarterback is going to be looking for that tight end safe zone a lot, especially when that safe zone is as good as Travis Kelce. So he's going to see more than 100 targets still, no matter who the quarterback is. And he was number one last season when he, drastically improved from his 2 previous seasons. But even if you went back to his 2015 stats, he still would have been number 5 in the league last season. So he's a stud that plays and doesn't have an injury history. And to me, he still deserves that number 1 spot.
All right, so let's talk about these top 5 guys as a whole here. With the field kind of evening out the way it has over the past couple years, are any of these guys really worth taking earlier on in a draft where you're probably going to have to take them anymore at this point?
Dude, no. And I think that's going to be a really difficult thing for those. See, I'm not speaking for me because I wasn't this guy, but there are those owners that said, listen, I'm grabbing Gronk. I'm going to own him. And they're used to that. Well, my second or my third round pick is a tight end. And I think that, like I said, it wasn't my strategy a handful of years ago, but I think it was a valid one because when you grabbed Gronk, assuming he was on the field, you were light years ahead of everybody else at that position. So the value was there. But I think you've said it twice now about the leveling out of the position. There are multiple guys that that aren't in this tier that I'm very comfortable starting. And not because I've always been a tight end streamer or I don't need a stud there, because they're going to put up huge numbers. So I think if you were that owner that was like, hey, I got to grab Gronk, that's going to hurt you now because 7 rounds ahead of when I'm going to take Kyle Rudolph, you're not going to outscore me that much.
Yeah, for me, it really depends on your strategy. If your strategy is to lose, then you should take one of these guys. No, I'm just kidding. Here's what it comes down for me. I think the shift has been so big now, and they are close. But the shift has been so big that most guys aren't going to draft a Gronk or a Reed or guys like that, especially if they're scared off by injuries like I am. So it could be worth it. And here's what I mean. If you're drafted in a slot and it comes down to guys like an Alshon or a Cooks are available, and one of the Gronks or the Reeds are available because it slipped that way, because it could be because Cooks is projected at 26, Alshon at 39, Gronk is projected at 31, and Reed at 50. So they're all in the same area. So it might be worth taking one of those guys. And here's why. Gronk in 2015, he scored 216.4 in our league, and he was by far number one in every league. So last season, if you would have had him and he would have scored that, he would have been wide receiver number 8, ahead of Julio. So if healthy, Gronk will score a ridiculous amount. And if healthy, which is a big if, he'll undoubtedly be number 1 or number 2 in scoring. And which will also equate to being a top 10 receiver from your tight end slot. So if you're getting him where you're already taking a risk, then I think it's worth the risk, but not early on for sure.
See, the thing for me is Gronk gives you the touchdowns, but other than Gronk with the touchdowns, you can't depend on that from any other guy. So realistically, if you want to take the chance on injury-riddled Rob Gronkowski, I'm not going to fault you for that. But after that, your best stat line that you're going to get from one of these guys is like basically what Kelce gave you last year. 85 catches, 1,000 yards, 5, maybe 6 touchdowns. All right? That's
really good,
not
though.
Yes, it is for a tight end, and I get that.
but there's like 8 of those this year. There's not one.
There's like 8 of them. And on top of that, I mean, you got to look at it. This is how I've been looking at it the last couple of years from the tight end position. They score points the exact same way that a wide receiver does. So I'm not going to overdraft a tight end because it's a different category. You know what I mean? Like, because the tight end is his own slot, I'm going to draft that exactly how I would draft the wide receivers in that same group. So, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not overreaching for one of the tight ends when 8 of them are going to be in the same group. It's the same thing that you guys always talk about wide receivers. Unless you're going to get one of the top ones, don't overdraft a number 15 wide receiver, you know, when 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20 are all going to get you the same stats. You have to look at it the same way with tight ends.
I agree to some extent, but like I said with Gronk, if he's healthy, which I'm not going to own him because he's generally not, but if he is, he's going to put up top 10 wide receiver stats. So not only will you have a really good running back, a number 1 running back, or 2 number 1 running backs, and a wide receiver, a number 1 wide receiver, then you add another guy that has potential, very likely potential to be a top 10 wide receiver from an extra spot that you're just taking for granted, and probably 5 or 6 points a game that you're getting from a guy that's like, I don't know about Kyle Rudolph. Who knows what's going to happen with him? We're going to talk about him in a little bit, but a guy like that.
300 targets.
So he's probably a bad example, but like an Eric Ebron, who is also an injury risk and down in that 11 to 15 range, you're going to get 5 or 6 points more a game at least from Gronk to add to your other positions. So that's a big advantage.
So listen, I think that, you know, Eric chimes in on YouTube live right now and says that unless a solid starter falls to me, I'd much rather stream tight ends than be concerned about being able to grab one when there's other skill players available. I think I
agree with that.
And I think that that's going to be the general consensus that you're going to find. And I think the biggest reason for that is because you're not going to have that crazy drop off in points from like the number 12 tight end to like one of the top 3. If you do, it's going to be a real rarity, but you're going to have those bigger drop offs at other key positions. You know, we'll talk till we're blue in the face about that with running backs. So I think that he's got a valid point there.
To piggyback on that, to agree with his position, and the reason I've kind of always been a tight end streamer is because I think more than any other position, you can really pay attention to that defensive points against with a tight end. I mean, there are teams, you know, the Cardinals come to mind from a few years back, the Colts from a few years back. There are teams that just don't have a linebacker that can run with them.
Right.
Or you know, still the Colts. Or they're they're unwilling to bring a safety down in the box to do it. It's just not part of their scheme. So if you see, you know, those teams that are bottom 5 in the league covering the tight end, there are a bottom 5 against the running back too, but they still might put up a good game plan or this or that. There are teams that just don't own a player who can cover the tight end. So, obviously as an owner, that's not going to happen every week that there's a free agent out there for you that plays one of those teams, but there's enough where you can play with it a little bit versus having to spend that second, third round pick. That's what kills me. If you're going to take one with like your 6th, then I can live with that. But, when you're taking a tight end and I'm grabbing one of the top 10 running backs, I can stream later. It just makes too much sense to do it.
Absolutely.
All right, so just literally just a one-word answer here. We don't really need any explanation on this. With 3 guys in this top 5 that are very frequently injured, and we've detailed that, which player are you the least confident in out of the guys in the top 5?
Jordan Reed. He's never played 16.
For me, it's Gronk. I actually took a lot of heat in a competition I was in a magazine that was published here, and I ranked Gronkowski outside of my top 10 of projecting where I think they're going to finish the season. And part of that was, because that's what I project him at, but mostly I just don't trust him to play at all. And I'll Reed too, but he's got a lot less mouths to feed in Washington than Gronk does.
I guess Gronk, just because we haven't been able to see him stay healthy. Like every year, it's something, even if it's something small. You know what I mean? It's just Reed. I think is going to benefit from the fact that his quarterback really does love him. Tom, although he does force the ball to Gronk somewhat, there are a lot more mouths to feed there just because he spreads it out. He always makes a smart throw. You know what I mean? Like, kind of like what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago with Andy Dalton. Like Dalton, Cousins might force it to Reed even when he shouldn't, but Brady's going to make the smart throw. So that coupled with the fact that Gronk can't stay healthy.
Yeah, and it's the back too. Like that kind of thing is going to keep creeping up.
Yeah. Listen, I'll just follow the rules and just say Gronk and move on.
Sorry. I'm not a rule follower, not tonight.
It's good. It doesn't matter. Honestly, it's good to give a little more insight. I was just trying to move along here. So let's get into our number 6 through 10 players, the tight end position. Number 6, we've got Tyler Eifert, followed by Martellus Bennett, Zach Ertz, Hunter Henry, and Delaney Walker, rounding out our top 10. There's a couple of guys in this zone here where when you look at them, you wouldn't really be surprised at all if they finished among the top 3 tight ends this season. So for you, if you have to look at it and examine it, which of these players has the absolute highest ceiling for you?
I'll jump in, and this is literally, it's been like 7 years since I had a player I was just a homer on. Pretty much since McNabb left, I've been pretty even keeled about my own team, but I believe with everything in me that Zach Ertz is going to end this season as one of the top 3 tight ends. I sent you guys some numbers the other day. I don't think any of these numbers are out of reach for him. 100 catches, 1,100 yards, 10 touchdowns. I'm not saying that's going to be his line, but I think each one of those is very, very reachable. As the season went on, especially the last few games, he found a real connection with Carson Wentz. That's not going to change. And if anything, it's going to open up a little bit now that Philadelphia actually has some wide receivers that belong in the NFL. So for me, I'm not going to sit here and say he's going to be, but of this group, he's the one I trust the most. He's in a situation where he's comfortable. He already has a connection with his quarterback. I really, really, really like him this year. So he's got that ceiling for me.
I love this group of tight ends so much more than I love the top 5 that we already discussed. Like, I would much rather own anyone in this group, not just from a value standpoint of you get to draft them in the later rounds, but just in general that I like these players more. I like their upside more than the other guys. I won't say Ertz, even though I think it probably will be in this group. I'll go back to just a couple of years ago. Tyler Eifert was, right there at the top of the list for guys who you could potentially start thinking about drafting in the same category as Gronk. And then he got hurt, and he played half a season last year. But that guy's a red zone monster. He has the ability to go up against any defender and catch a high pointed ball. And, I am a little worried that, adding Ross might take away some targets for him, but I would still pick Eifert, I think, if you could promise me he's healthy.
Yeah, and Ross doesn't take away from where his production is, because
Right.
Ross isn't a jump ball guy. So I have to say Eifert, if he ever gets healthy. I mean, again, a big if, but he's a touchdown machine. When he's on the field, he scores, and he plays in a pretty good offense. They scores a lot and has to pass because they're down a lot. So he's going to score the touchdowns. I think that Ertz, even if they both play 16, I think Ertz will have more yards, but I think Eifert will score enough touchdowns to put him ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you guys on Tyler Eifert. I just think that they basically built that entire offense around him 2 seasons ago in the red zone. So, I mean,
Miles doesn't love it.
no,
Well,
I
it's
get
just-
that.
It's not my night. Like, we take turns, I guess, but tonight's the night that I'm going to be alone in every argument.
Wait a second. We don't take
Rocco
turns.
Rocco
We don't
paid
take
us.
turns. It's been me for 78 weeks, and now somebody else's turn.
He said to us before the show, I had the highest volume day in the history of our company today. Can I pay you guys to just
Yeah.
team up on Miles this week instead of me? No, it's just exclusively for the fact that he has so many targets in the red zone.
Yeah.
The health has to be a big thing, but that's the selling point for me more than anything else. So real quickly in this group here, something I just wanted to highlight. I wanted to kind of take the temperature of the room here because everybody has Hunter Henry in that 8 and 9 range, and I've got him ranked at number 12. So I'm just trying to see, is there something other than the touchdown total last year? He had 8 touchdowns last year. Is there something that I'm missing on Hunter Henry? Because I just feel like it didn't feel like he was really that into the game plan last year. He had 53 targets. He had 36 catches. It just feels like it's going to be hard to maintain that percentage of touchdowns on a low target share. And I'm looking at the team that they're kind of putting back on the field now. Obviously, with Williams getting injured, there's some more targets that are going to be back on the table. But I like that wide receiver group. Call me a sucker, but I think Keenan Allen is going to be heavily involved again.
Yes.
And I just don't see Antonio Gates going away in the red zone. So apparently I'm alone on that, but I'm just floating it out there.
Yeah, I think Gates was the one that had 93 targets last year, 7 touchdowns. I do agree that to expect 8 touchdowns again might not happen, although I think a lot of the upside and the reason I have him ranked in the top 10 at number 9 is because he has a quarterback that's always looked at the tight end. Now, part of that's because his tight end's always been Antonio Gates, who's pretty good, but Hunter Henry's not bad either. I mean, we're not talking about some 6th rounder that tripped into a reserve role. Like, this was a guy they targeted in the draft last year. So I could see, his touchdowns falling to 6 or so. But the reason I am high on him is because I think this is the year he takes the 100+ targets, or in that area. And Gates kind of takes the back seat role a little bit. I was a little scared about my ranking when Williams was still there, but I don't think he's going to play much, if at all, this year. So now I feel even more confident that Henry's going to get those targets. And like I said before, this is not some schlub. This guy's an athlete. He can do things with those targets that Gates was able to do as a player as well. So I think Rivers might kind of see that he still has that same situation. It's just a different player.
For me, it boils down to the fact that, Antonio Gates still in the field, but both of them are going to see targets and targets aplenty. Williams is not going to start the season, at least more than likely miss a big chunk of it. Come week 3, Keenan will be gone. And then we can just start moving on with Phillip Rivers throwing to the tight ends. Like that's what it's going to be. Like, and he's going to throw for 4,000 yards again. So there's no reason to expect why both of those guys aren't going to get theirs. And Henry, I tend to like blow up stats sometimes, make them more valuable than they actually are. But that touchdown percentage last year is ridiculous. And like, even if it drops a little, he's targeted in the red zone. He's targeted, when they're down in that area. There's no reason to expect why it wouldn't continue, at least to some degree. So if he may not do it the same percentage, but if the targets go up, he's going to be right there in that 7, 8, 9, 10 range again.
Yeah, Rivers last year targeted tight end 26.1% of the time, which was number 7 in the league, and a lot. So I mean, more than a fourth of his passes are going to a tight end. And last year they admittedly forced the ball to Antonio Gates when they knew they weren't winning and they wanted him to break the records. So they're not going to do that again this season because they have a chance to be in contention this season, assuming that somebody on their team stays healthy. So they're going to be forcing the ball still to the tight end. It's going to be Hunter Henry, though. And he's really good. South, he's really good. So
I'm not denying that he's really good. I feel like there's such a supporting cast that Rivers already loves there. So I don't know. But I get what you guys are saying. All right. Let's round out this tight end discussion. Talk about number 11 through 15 here real quickly. Number 11, we've got the criminally undervalued Kyle Rudolph, followed by Jack Doyle, Eric Ebron, Kobe Fleener, and O.J. Howard at number 15. So I just got to bring it up right out of the gates here. I'm the only person that has Kyle Rudolph in the top 10. Well, actually, no, I apologize. Miles has him number 10.
Come on, fearless leader.
Yep. So inside of the top 10 at single digits. So, we're kind of nitpicking here a little bit, but I got to wonder, are we seeing, for people that have him outside, are you seeing a drop off in his production? Are we worried about the quarterback situation? Does it matter there? What goes into that decision?
Listen, I love tight ends from Notre Dame, but this guy has 132 targets last year, 83 catches, and 840 yards. It's just check down Sammy. That's all it is. Like,
he's a PPR monster.
He's a PPR monster. I get it, but like you have more targets than anyone else in the league, and you're 4th in the league in yards because all of your catches are 5-yard outs, and then you get tackled. He's not blazing by people. He's not.
Those all still count.
I understand they count. Yes, in a PPR format they count. So great, you're getting the PPR points, but he's not giving you a ton of yards. The touchdowns, 7's a good number for a tight end. I'm not going to say it's not, but as I've said many, many times, I will never bank on the touchdown number. Like, you just, unless you're a top wide receiver or running back, you cannot bank on the touchdown number. So with that being said, he just doesn't. That offense does not produce enough yards for my liking anyway, for me to trust him with a top 10 role. We just named 10 guys that are high volume guys in their own offenses that are much more attractive picks than Kyle Rudolph.
Yeah, I've got to get in here because no, go ahead.
Well, I exclaimed as a PPR monster, and you're kind of making it seem like that's the only format where he matters. Well, in a PPR last year, he finished 2nd. In a standard league last year, he finished 2nd. So the format didn't matter. The only tight end that beat him in any format last year was Travis Kelce. So check down Sammy's getting it done.
I mean, 840 yards is still 840 yards out of the tight end position.
Pretty good.
I don't care what his yards per catch is. I want the bulk. I want all that volume. I mean, if volume is king, if volume is king, Kyle Rudolph is the mayor of Volume City. All right.
Oh my gosh.
And as long as Sleeves McGee, aka Check Down Sammy, aka Sam Bradford, is the quarterback in Minnesota, he's going to get more volume than you could shake a stick at. So 132 targets. I expect him to be up that high again if Bradford is the quarterback. I am a little concerned, obviously, if the situation changes there and Teddy Bridgewater comes back and he's able to play, because he's a little more confident in throwing the ball further than 5 yards. So it could change. But as things stand right now, there's no way for me he's not a top 10 tight end.
Sam Bradford's also ready to play 7 games again, right? He has to get injured this year. This has to be the year.
It's been a while.
So, he did have a good year. There's no denying it. But I just don't think he can keep up the pace of 83 catches. But with Sammy sleeves, he might be able to.
All right, let's just put a nice little bow tie on this thing here. Is there any player that we haven't really discussed, that's maybe outside of our top 15 that you think really could just have a big year and have a major fantasy impact this year? So if there's not a guy, then there's not a guy. But if there's somebody that you want to throw out there, go ahead.
Does it have that here? I'm looking for a loophole. Does it have to actually be out of our top 15 or just a guy we didn't really talk about?
I'll allow it for a guy we didn't talk about.
Jack Doyle rules.
No rules.
Jack Doyle rules, man. I like, we have him pre-ranked, and I think that's kind of perfect because he's not a guy I know what to expect from as a ceiling yet, but I do know his quarterback likes tight ends. His quarterback likes tight ends named Jack Doyle. He showed us that last year. He targets the tight ends, always has targeted the tight ends for touchdowns, and that's the kind of thing that you can bank on. Quarterbacks have trends. Now, I'm not talking about a 5-game trend here. This is a 5-year trend with Andrew Luck, even going back to Stanford when he was targeting Kobe Fleener all the time. So he likes Jack Doyle. He likes tight ends. Doyle is very sure-handed. I'm not expecting 1,000 yards, but again, like I said with Ertz, I'm not shocked with 10 touchdowns out of Jack Doyle at all.
And listen, you got to buy in now while you can on him pretty much because he's becoming a hot name at the position. Yeah. And I'm not going to give away too much for free here, because I'm going to plug away an article that I put up last week with the site. I put up some best value players based on where they're currently being drafted. But Jack Doyle is shooting up that chart. So you can go to footballgoons.com and read that article. But Jack Doyle is a player that I highlighted on there.
I just want to talk about, just from a skill point, a skill standpoint, OJ Howard has got to be watched. Jameis is coming into his own as it is, and I know there's a lot of mouths to feed in that offense, but once again, we'll go back to Jameis is going to throw for 4,000 yards this year. Jameis is probably going to top the 30 touchdown number. That means that there's going to be a lot of balls to go around, so there's no reason to think that a guy with OJ Howard's skill set can't get involved heavily in that offense, especially in the red zone where he is. Let's be honest, he's the size of Gronk. So that's a mismatch for who's ever covering him. That's a mismatch.
I followed the rules a little closer for you, South, because I know you like that. So I went with the guy outside the top 15, and I like CJ Fedorowicz a lot. He's a really good tight end, and I have him at 16 now, but I'll likely be moving him up. First, he gets a quarterback upgrade this season. Whoever it is, pick somebody. It's a quarterback upgrade. And he wasn't just good. I heard the rumor that he was just good because Brock couldn't throw it down the field. No, he was good because he's a good tight end. Mm-hmm. So secondly, he plays the Colts twice, so that's about 500 yards and 4 touchdowns. So if you just play him for those 2, it's going to be worth it for you. But keep an eye on him. He's worth stashing away.
All right, let's be done with tight ends. You can get the rest of our tight end rankings, footballgoons.com. Click on the fantasy rankings tab at the top. You could sort them by your favorite goon. You could sort them by your favorite last name, your favorite college, however you want to. It doesn't matter. We need to move on from the tight end position. All right, let's talk about draft strategies. Gentlemen, believe it or not, the calendar is just itching to be turned to the month of August.
Oh, man.
And when the calendar turns over to month of August, it is officially draft month for most leagues that are out there listening. Some people are going to go early. Some people are going to wait until the last minute. But the majority of people are drafting in the month of August. So it's time to talk about some strategy stuff here. The first thing I want to talk about, last year, the biggest thing was the whole 0 running back strategy. We detailed over and over again how we didn't believe it was going to work. It ended up not working. And now we're talking about a 0 wide receiver strategy this year. It's picking up steam in fantasy circles. I guess my question is, I think we know where Deal's going to land on this one. Are you buying in on a 0 wide receiver strategy where you're just taking running backs, quarterbacks, whatever else, and not really touching a wide receiver anywhere near the top of your draft?
I think it's dumb. I said the same thing about zero RB last year. And I'll just go back to what I said about that. I think any time that you go into a draft saying I'm not going to touch this, that's dumb.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I know Deal is he's going to draft 3 running backs in a row in most leagues. But if it's the 3rd round and Odell Beckham's there, you're going to draft him.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, he's not going to be there, but
Right.
I think anytime you go in and say, I'm doing this, 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 and this, you're hurting yourself because you're not opening yourself up to the value that may drop to you. So, if you're talking about, I'll probably wait on receiver a little bit, just fine, but keep an eye out for, wow, I just really didn't think so-and-so was going to be there. Just don't paint yourself into a corner. You're doing yourself a disservice by not taking whatever comes to you.
Listen, I'm a full-time believer in running backs, but I don't even buy into this. Can we just stop with the zero or everything rolls? Like, I want to coin a new draft strategy called Draft Smart, because that's what you should do. Stop
value based.
Stop trying to come up with this gimmick. I want a guy that I have ranked top 20. That should be doable. And I'm still drafting 3 straight running backs. And I should still be able to get like a Doug Baldwin or a Jarvis Landry, Demaryius Thomas. And I feel good about one of them being my top wide receiver, knowing that I'm really strong at running back. But just draft for value and what's best for your team. Don't go in with these stupid strategies that you read in some magazine somewhere that says, well, you can probably win by eliminating this position. No, don't eliminate anybody. Just draft smart.
Yeah, the zero running back thing, as much as we argued about it last year, I didn't do it in any of my leagues because you just have to play the chips how they fall to you. Like, I mean, I know it's a trend. By this time next year, we'll be talking about zero quarterback, or hopefully we're talking about zero tight end. But no, like it's whatever the hip fad is. You know who wins leagues? Guys who take the value where they're drafting.
Miles wins leagues.
Miles wins leagues.
Yeah, listen, the only thing I'm going to say on this, because you guys have really hit the nail on the head here, is like, it just feels like it's such a saturated industry right now with fantasy football that somebody somewhere is sitting in like a dark desk somewhere. What ingenious strategy can I pitch to get clicks on my website this year? I mean, it just feels like that has that kind of tone to it. So, it's silly. The only zero strategy I'm interested in is zero kickers. I don't want kickers involved in fantasy football anymore.
That's your fantasy, huh?
Yes. All right. So across the board, we feel pretty consistent that you just have to draft on the best value. You can't get caught up in these silly zero strategies that are out there. So another area that's really picking up a lot of steam over the past couple of years, and we've kind of been ahead of things on this, is multi-quarterback leagues. They're on the rise everywhere that you go, everywhere that you play. How do you navigate where you draft when you play in a multi-quarterback league? It could be the super flex or starting 2 quarterbacks, whatever. What's the best way that you have found to navigate that?
I don't think it's a lot different for most people. I mean, it depends on your league. I'm in several multiple QB leagues, and there is one where the league as a whole seems to really value quarterbacks. And I'm talking, these are 2 leagues I'm in. The settings are almost exactly the same. And in one, 5 quarterbacks are going to get drafted in the first round. It's going to happen. And in the other one, there's probably not going to be any. It's almost like a standard draft where, everybody waits a little bit and maybe like 2 rounds ahead of where you might normally target, just because you have to grab one you can count on or whatnot. But this is one of those, like, not to be ride the fence guy, but just read your league. Understand where, it's tough to do one of these as a public league because you have no idea what's going to happen. Right. But when you're in with people that how they're going to draft, what they value, you can change things up a little bit. But it kind of this is irritating because I love talking about draft strategy, but I feel like I always come back to, like, trust yourself and who you are as an owner. Like, just because there's a run on quarterbacks in one of these leagues, if you didn't like one of the top 10 guys anyways, don't just grab one because you feel like you have to. Like, know what you wanted to do coming in and stick to that. Don't let your league dictate what you're going to do.
Yeah, I like that advice, and same with you. Not a lot changes for me as far as draft strategy. I'm still going to probably fall towards the end of taking my first quarterback, and I'm probably going to be about middle of the pack taking my second. And this doesn't change that. I'll probably trade to get somebody to give me Andy at some point. So I'm not going to draft him, but I'll get one of you suckers to trade me.
Miles, you said something. I think it was you that said something last year that really struck with me, and I think it's great advice for all of our listeners. If you don't want to spend the draft capital on taking one of the top QBs, then that's fine. Wait a little while and be one of the last guys to take him, but be one of the first guys to take your second QB then. You know what I mean? Because you don't want to roll in, in a 10-team 2 QB league. You don't want to be the guy that rolls out there with number 10 and number 20. You know what I mean? So if you're gonna not go after one of the big dogs, one of the top 4 or 5, that's fine. But then make sure you get like 10 and 12. You know what I mean? And I think that's a great way to look at it.
It's okay for Carr to be your number 1 if Winston's your number 2.
Exactly.
Exactly. You're good.
I think, kind of to Rocco's point, one of the things that I try to pay attention to is I want to know where that major drop-off happens in the scoring. So last year you had probably 4 or 5 quarterbacks who were 50 and 60 points above the rest of the group, whereas at other positions there was a very distinct and very sharp cutoff with the running backs where it would quickly drop off to 50 and 60.
Oh, technical
like in this group,
there he is.
If I miss on a quarterback in this group, I'm going to be chasing a lot of points all the time. So I don't know how much of that we got.
You froze for a second there.
Did you get a call waiting on your dial-up?
Yeah, I did. You know what it is? I was waiting for my AOL to stop making that noise in my ear.
You've got mail.
South bar my Windows computer for the week.
Yeah. All I'm trying to say is know where that major drop-off is. I don't want to be chasing points from the quarterback position all the time. So that's what I kind of try and think of.
South started watching those pipes.
Yes. All right, let's talk about another strategy, and I've been reading a lot about that this year specifically. Talk about handcuff players. Is drafting a handcuff player over a potential late upside player smart? I know a lot of people are going to try and find that Devontae Freeman toward the back end of a draft ever since somebody hit on him. But is it smarter to go with a handcuff for a guy that you're going to be relying on?
I've never bought in on handcuffs. I get it as a strategy for sure. If you like Dallas's situation, so you draft Zeke, I could understand why you would also want Darren McFadden. I get it. But I've just never bought in because I'm not going to draft a less talented player than someone on the board. Now, if you own Spencer Ware and you're going to draft Kareem Hunt, I'm all for that because for me, that's less of a handcuff in case Spencer Ware goes down and more, whenever Hunt takes over the backfield, I have 16 weeks of the Chiefs' main back. I get that. But for me, if it's just a guy like, God, if David Johnson goes down, I definitely want this guy. I've never bought into that. That's not been something I do.
No, I agree for the most part. In some scenarios, I probably would. Like if I draft Bell, which I most likely won't, but I'd want to have James Conner because I always project Bell to get injured. I've been right 50% of the time for him. So, and now he's already hampered by an off-season groin injury, and I think Connor's really good. So if you're drafting a handcuff, it should be a guy that you also think is a good running back. Not, well, I drafted fill in the blank because the guy might get injured. Yeah, but now you have 2 guys that suck. So don't fill your lineup with guys that suck.
Yeah, and I think it's important to clarify.
Also a good strategy.
I agree with both of you, so I'm not gonna say the same thing, but I will clarify. Let's not forget there's a big difference between drafting a guy's handcuff and drafting a back that's in a shared role. Tevin Coleman is not
Yeah, no.
well,
He's not a
I-
handcuff.
no, I think it's important to note for some people because some people just look at the backup as the handcuff. Tevin Coleman's going to score his own points. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I hate to say it, because I'm not trying to be a homer here, but Bilal Powell and Matt Forte are both going to score points in that Jets offense, regardless of which one starts or gets hurt or doesn't get hurt. You know what I mean? It's just the way those types of players are used. So it's very different to make sure that you understand the difference between drafting a guy's handcuff and drafting a guy that's going to get you points on a regular basis in the offense, regardless of who's playing.
I did note, and I'll mention, I wasn't going to, but since you said that, if you draft Freeman, if you draft Forte, you're probably in a bigger hole. But if you draft Freeman and Tevin, you're not starting both of those guys. So you're going to be irritated all the time. Like, you're just going to hate fantasy football if you draft both of those guys, because there's no way you're starting them both. Unless they play a terrible team one week. But still, you have to have another option on your team other than a number 2 running back that's probably not going to see the field as much as one. You're not going to start them both. So you're going to blame your whole season. Well, that one time that Tevin Coleman scored 62 points is why I lost my championship, even though it was week 4. You're just going to be miserable all season.
Yeah, I'll just kind of quickly throw in my 2 cents here. I'm leaning more towards handcuffs, and I think that the situation has to be right. I think the situation has to be right.
Even better.
It's right for you.
Yep.
I mean, listen, think about it this way, though. If you're taking a spot on your roster and basically rotating it every single week, and that player or that slot almost never sees your lineup for the entire year, why would you not want the security of the backup running back in if it's a high volume, high running volume, and the guy's a good backup to your starter? Why would you not want that security to be able to say, hey, look, there's going to be no loss of production from this spot? So, I mean, again, it's riding the fence because the situation has to almost be perfect, but I don't think that you should just dismiss handcuffs in any way.
Here's
I
my
don't
answer for that.
dismiss. I just don't do it.
You said, why would you not have somebody's handcuff when you're probably not going to use them? Because that guy that's on your bench is a handcuff for one of your players. Somebody else that you draft at a better value is a handcuff for everybody on your team, on your fantasy team.
If any of my running backs are below par, I can start so-and-so.
But not if somebody's handcuff that's not playing.
Right. The only way I'm starting my handcuff is if my starter gets hurt.
Right, that one guy.
Right.
Yeah, I guess I'm looking at it like this. Like, if you draft Zeke, you know that's a team that wants to run the ball first, wants to run the ball second, wants to run the ball third. So if something happens to Zeke, Darren McFadden's going to come in and have every opportunity to be productive.
But we saw 2 years ago that he's not productive.
Yeah, but I mean, like in a short spurt, it could happen for you.
It doesn't make sense for me because in most leagues, like a guy like Terrence West or Danny Woodhead or Theo Riddick are going to go undrafted, but they're going to score points, and you're going to take Darren McFadden and let him on your bench in the event that Zeke gets injured, because he's going to score 9 points if Zeke doesn't get injured. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I get the whole taking the handcuff of the top guys. I understand what you're saying. I just don't like it because, like, other than Bell, I'm not expecting Zeke to get hurt. I'm not expecting David Johnson to get hurt.
Right.
I'm at this point, I'm not really even expecting Shady McCoy to get hurt. So realistically, you're taking a guy just in case, and that person's sitting on your bench unproductive all year long.
Right.
All right, well, we'll leave it at that on the handcuff topic. We kind of segued into this accidentally, but talking about injury concerns when you're drafting, I think I know what the answer is going to be, and it's going to kind of be a situational answer, but how much do you weigh injury concerns into your drafting decisions? I get this question all the time, from people who are thinking about investing highly in a Le'Veon Bell or players like that who have an injury history. I think we know where Deal's going to stand on a lot of players, but how do you weigh that in? How do you balance that out?
A lot.
I'm gonna go first here because this really bit me in the butt 2 years ago, and I think it's a great way to look at it. I never looked at that the way Deal does, and I took 2 players, both of which at the time very high value, back-to-back picks at number 8 and 9 in our draft, and that was Shady and Jamal Charles. And we left the draft, and everybody was like, "Wow, great draft! You really crushed it this year." Both of them got hurt, and I wound up losing the whole season. All right. If you're going to draft a guy who you know has an injury history, your other player at that position better be a more reliable player, because you cannot afford to lose both of your backs or 2 of your 3 wide receivers or your starting quarterback and your backup quarterback because of injury. You know what I mean? Like all year long, you were probably in great shape if you were in a 2-quarterback league with Marcus Mariota and Derek Carr. And then you probably got spanked in your championship game. You know what I mean? So no, like I'm a little bit more open to drafting those guys with injury risks, but more recently I'm paying much more attention to who my second guy is then.
Yeah, I pay attention some, not a lot, especially with Keenan Allen.
Yeah.
I'm
I'd say
gonna own that guy.
about 0.
I'm gonna own that guy till he's like 43. I just say him.
Isn't that
am.
now?
I want to draft. I want to draft his son already. I just love Keenan Allen, man.
It doesn't
Keenan Allen-
make sense.
Keenan Allen's hairline is already 43, but the rest of him is like
This is
45.
true.
Hey, settle down now. That's not funny.
Oh man, listen, I'm kind of getting to the point where I'm getting a lot more like Deal, where I'm weighing it in a lot more as time goes on, and I think Rocco makes a good point.
job.
All it takes is a couple times getting burnt by it, honestly, and you kind of sour on different players because of, well, except unless you're Miles.
Yeah, I've been burnt so many times. I just don't care. I like him.
Because we'll have this conversation every year, and then when he tears his ACL this year, he's going to say, the dude's only 24.
He's so good.
But no, I think it's important, and Rocco made a good point. Like, if you're going to take a chance on somebody, you can't take a chance on 2 somebodies. You've got to have a solid option, next to him. So I'm not opposed to taking a chance on somebody. I'm the guy who up until this year has blown the horn for Jamal Charles relentlessly. We're making fun of Miles over Keenan Allen. I was that with Jamal Charles because the upside was so huge all the time. But if I was going to take Jamal Charles, I was going to make sure that I was going to get somebody who was very dependable to line up with.
Yeah, all about balance, I think.
It's not
You don't.
affecting my every decision.
It's affecting your internet.
I guess so. All right. Here. All right. We've talked about this internally. Should you draft players with it in mind to trade them?
I'm gonna start this off because this is exactly what I was talking about. Yes and no. Yes, I think even if you don't like a player, but he's next on your list, I don't think you should skip over him just because you don't particularly like that player. So I'm going to say draft the, quote unquote best player available, and then obviously try and work it out. Now it's hard for us to talk about this realistically because when we do talk about it, you guys know I can't stand Jay Ajayi. But if Jay Ajayi falls to me, I have to take him and then try and move him. Now, South, you make this argument all the time. You know how I value him, so you feel like you can really win over the trade on me. But generally speaking, the rest of your league is not going to know the things that we know about each other because we talk about it every single week. So, in fairness, to sum up, I absolutely believe that you should draft the best player available, and when you do that, if it's not a guy that you're particularly high on, then yes, try and move him by all means. I'm okay with it.
I do it sometimes, and the last time I did it worked out great for me. I turned CJ Anderson into Le'Veon Bell. So it has to be a perfect situation. It's a rarity that it works out well because you're just not going to get the value in return. But I guess if you get a guy at a low price that other guys are high on and you're not, then it's worth it. But you have to guarantee that you're going to trade that guy.
I don't do it with, like Rock, you were saying, with like you got to take a guy. I don't agree with that. You got to take guys that you believe in, regardless of how other people feel. But I do think you should trade or draft a trade in a sense of, I can't remember the last time that in one specific league I wasn't in a position to go 2-for-1 because I draft heavy depth at the running back and receiver positions. I always have in that league. Somebody's always panicking. Guess who they come knocking to? All right, well, you can have my second and third running back for your top one. Done deal. So then I have depth to get myself through buys, and then I move that depth at the end for a higher caliber player. So that's kind of where I why I draft a trade and why, Deal and I's minds are alike with drafting. And it's in a 2 running back league. I want 3 running backs, my first 3 picks. Now, not if a great receiver falls or whatever, but I do that. And people say your 3rd round pick's on the bench for now,
Yeah.
but I also, for all 3 buys, I have 2 great running backs. And when your guy goes down, now you're trading me Julio Jones, so now I have Julio Jones and David Johnson. Obviously that's a pipe dream in a way, but that's a way that you get ahead in your league. I mean, how else do you get 2 for? You draft a lot of depth and you trade it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that I necessarily look to draft to trade just because of what Deal said. For me, the biggest thing is that it's going to be really hard to get that return on what you invested to get that player in the first place. So if it happens, it happens. But I'm not necessarily drafting a player with the thought in my mind that I'm drafting this person just to trade them, because you're never going to get the value back. To me, I'd rather draft, in the situation that you mentioned with Jay Ajayi, I'd rather draft a running back that I like, that's right in that same spot, that I'm just going to play, rather than worry about, am I going to get a good enough return back? Because you're not really going to get a bounty in return.
I guess I just mean, like, in terms of, like, I'm not going to, like, if I feel like a certain, not just in the first round, but if I feel like a certain cliff is about to fall off, whether it be the quarterback position or the running back position, where, like, there's an obvious dip from one group to the next, I'm not going to pass on a guy just because I don't like him if I feel like the dip comes right after him. I'm going to draft that guy, and then I'm going to try and move him.
Right. All right, let's talk about this, the last thing we have on the list here. And this is pertaining to having a draft plan. And I think that we're all going to kind of agree on this, but how do you guys feel about being married to a specific draft plan?
Terrible.
Well,
Nice.
To an extent, I'm okay with it, in a sense of, like, who you are. Like, there's nothing that's going to happen that gives me Aaron Rodgers this year. You know what I mean? So, like, I'm married to that, in a sense of, like, if he's there in the 8th round, I'll take him, but he's not.
Right.
Just so I mean, I guess to an extent, I'm kind of being cheap with it. But yeah, I like in the notes you say be prepared to deviate at least some. That's what it's about. I mean, I've hit on this before a couple weeks ago, where it's like we're in an age where I don't know anything more than anybody I'm drafting against could know if they put in the time. I mean, the internet tells us anything we want to know. You can find stats from whenever, trends from whenever, coordinators and their I mean, there's nothing that I can find that you can't. But where I can beat you in a draft is by taking that knowledge and kind of zigging when somebody else zags, and knowing where the rest of the league is going to be going, and kind of taking advantage of the value that drops to me. So I think that deviation is kind of a key word, where it's like, man, I really wanted a running back in the 3rd round, but here's Jordy Nelson. You know what I mean? I'm taking him.
Well, yeah, and I think obviously being able to change on the fly is the most important thing you can do. That's the most important strategy you can take into the draft. But that all goes back to playing the best hand that's dealt to you. You know what I mean? Like, I'll say till I'm blue in the face that I want to start off this year's draft for our league going running back, running back, running back. But, you know, like you just said, if Jordy's there in the third round, like that's a pick that you got to make. You know, so you got to be able to adjust on the fly.
It's crazy how many times I've seen somebody show up to a draft and had a specific plan. Third round, I'm taking a running back. Fourth round, I'm taking a quarterback, and they don't deviate from that. And all of a sudden, in the third round, a top 5 wide receiver is sitting there, or you know, just a player who they should be scooping up is sitting there, but they just won't deviate from that plan that they're so tied into. So I think you just have to be aware of what's happening, how things are falling.
I'm sick of you giving out my draft strategy, Self.
Yes. Ryan Deal has running back, running back, running back, maybe another running back.
I like it. I'm in.
All right, let's get to some questions here. The first one here is about tight ends, and we got an email to.
I thought we were done with tight ends.
We are, but this is kind of a way to make fun of them a little bit. So we got an email at footballgoons@gmail.com from Jack. Wants to know, what is the absolute earliest you would consider selecting a tight end given the depth at the position?
Whenever I feel like I need to grab Ertz, to be the earliest. I was joking with you guys before we recorded. Deal and I did a mock earlier today on Yahoo, and
It was so dumb.
I took Kobe Fleener in the 15th round. That was after my kicker, after my defense, and I feel okay.
But you took Brandon Marshall when you should have taken Ertz.
That was a mistake.
That's what we should talk about.
Mistakes were made.
Mistakes were made there. Like I said earlier, it depends on the spot I'm in. If Gronk is available later than I'd expect, I'll probably take him before a wide receiver. But other than that, I'm going to wait. And honestly, I'm 100% satisfied with taking Delaney Walker or somebody like that. So you can keep your Jordan Reeds or Tyler Eiferts. You can keep those with all 5 of these yellow Haribo's because I don't eat any of those. And these are Jordan Reeds of the world right here.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. Like I said before, I like our 5 to 10 tight ends better than our 1 through 5 guys. So I'm definitely not wasting a high pick on one. I'll wait until, you know, the 10th round plus, because by that point, you know, everybody probably will have one, and I'll probably be okay taking my 8, 9, or 10 guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the most part, in most leagues, you're probably going to get 10th round or later, where maybe 4 or 5 teams have already taken a tight end. So there's going to be a lot of available good players there. So don't panic, don't rush. If something falls to you, go ahead and take it. But otherwise, just take your time, keep stockpiling, other good players there who are going to help your team in a lot more effective ways.
Right.
All right. So, and our question of the week actually comes from Eric on Facebook. He wants to know, where do you prefer to draft from? Do you prefer selecting in the middle of rounds or at the end of a round? And how does your strategy change with your position?
This is one I know that we're different on. At least Deal and I are very different. I love the second to last pick or the second pick. I love being near the end, and I love owning that guy that's on the end, which in our shared league is Rocco this year.
Always. It's always.
Where I'm second to last and he's last. I think it's a really great way for me. You know, what I like about the ends is you can really have 2 guys you're targeting and feel fairly confident that you're going to get both. And I love the second pick from the end because I can look at Rocco's roster and understand which of those 2 players I can afford to wait on, because he's either full of those positions or he hates Julian Edelman, or, you know, if you know you're the player in your league as well, you're able to know what they like or don't like. Is too variable for me. I like to know what's coming to me. I like to know which players I have a decent shot at and which I can just sort of write off. I think it allows you to have a more solid plan going in because you have a good idea of who could be there. You know, not so much in the 9th, 10th round, but I have a great idea in the first 5 rounds of exactly who I'm going to be able to get, and I like that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. By the way, this is 2 years in a row because last year I drafted 1 and you drafted 2.
That's
So, and now this year it's 8 and 9. Sorry, 7 and 8. But yeah, I like being on the ends too. I like the knowledge of exactly what you said. Knowing, listen, I know I'm not going to get one of the top 3 or 4 players. That sucks. But I know exactly who's going to be there for me when I pick 8th and 9th. And then I know exactly who's going to be there again when I pick in the 3rd and the 4th. And honestly, I would rather be exactly what you just said, the one pick inside, either 2 or 7 or 9, whatever it is, however many teams are in your league. I'd rather be that one inside guy, but it just doesn't really happen for me. So, I mean, I'm just as happy being on. I would still rather be on the ends, 1 or last, than I would be 4th or 5th.
I actually prefer near the beginning, but I don't like 1. My favorite is 3 or 4 in an 8, 10, or 12 team league. You get the top, one of your top picks on the board, then you still get to come back through and pick quick, but a couple picks before 1, 2, and 3. So I just like that spot a lot.
Yeah, I'm with you. I love being right at number 4 or 5 because in general, there's 4 or 5 studs from year to year. So you're going to get one of those studs, but also you're not going to have to wait quite as long as being at the top to come back around and have a little bit more of a drop off there. So, I like being right at the front half, the back end of the front half of the league, wherever you're at, because you're getting, for the most part, barring some kind of weird injury, a stud who you're going to have all season long. So, and I like the consistency of having a really good idea of not worrying about, is there a run on these kinds of players? It's going to be another like 20 picks until it's get back to me or whatever. You don't have to really panic about that because you're kind of right in the middle of the flow all the time. So, but that's personal preference for me. All right. Well, that's actually going to do it for this edition of the podcast. We want to thank everyone, as always, for checking in on YouTube and watching us live. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so that you get a notification whenever we're going to go live each and every week. We stream this live pretty much every Sunday night at 9:30. You can subscribe and check us out on iTunes, TuneIn, Libsyn, Google Play, and a whole bunch of other places that you can link to through our website at footballgoons.com. You can go there for more details as well as our full fantasy football rankings, every position sortable by goon and by our deviations. Those are continually updating at this point. So you want to check in early and often so that you get the jump on the rest of your league. Keep up with us on social media as well. Facebook.com/footballgoons, and on the Twitter, we are at footballgoons. We want to hear from the Goon Squad. You can send us your questions, your comments, your concerns. And again, we are taking fence building questions still at this point. So send us whatever you want. We want to hear from you. Deal still hates me. I'm going to keep throwing that in there just about every week, I think. In the meantime, we'll catch you next time.